Tales from the Grey House, Episode 1, Any Port in a Storm. The rain hadn't let up since they left town, thick as treacle and just as black. Ruby's knuckles gripped the wheel like it owed her rent. In the passenger seat, Vinny flipped a spent lighter, counting seconds until they'd finally admit they were lost. They needed a place to lie low, but how do you hide when the storm won't let you see the road? They hadn't planned to run empty-handed. The heist was meant to be clean, in, out, 3 minutes, but someone screamed, someone fired early. Half the cops in town were apparently in the diner next door. Now the back seat held nothing but damp jackets and regret, and the Model T was riddled with bullet holes, rain dripping through them like tears. Then Ruby spotted it, a wrought iron gate barely visible through the downpour, yawning open like it had been waiting. Beyond it, nestled in the mist, stood the house, big, old, and set back far enough from the main road to hide anything illegal. "Think he's got antiques?" Ruby asked, pulling up slow. "Probably," Vinny muttered, eyeing the place. "In a fancy place like this, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe we can lie low for a while and make up for our losses in town." The front door opened before they knocked. Mordecai Gray stepped out like he'd rehearsed their arrival, one gloved hand gripping a hurricane lamp, the other tucked behind his back. "You've come far," he said, voice smooth as varnish. "You must be seeking shelter. Come in, and perhaps, while you're here, you'd care to see my collection." Shelves lined the entry hall, cluttered but curated, not with valuables, not quite. The pieces felt chosen for how they resisted categorization. A child's scooter missing its wheels, a pocket watch half melted as if caught in a fire that history forgot. A small reel-to-reel projector blinked alive on its own, casting flickering flames across the wallpaper. A silent title appeared, London After Midnight. Ruby wandered toward a bureau near the stairs. Her fingers brushed a cloth draped casually over its corner, as if once used to mop up a spill. It was damp, cold, and when she pulled her hand away, she wasn't sure if it was moisture or something thicker clinging to her skin. "Did you spill a drink, or is this mouldy rag an exhibit?" she asked. "An exhibit, madam. A memento from a theatre in Washington. A night where not just wine was spilled." Vinny paced behind her, eyeing the collection. "You picked these up at auctions or seances?" he muttered. Gray's smile was polite, unreadable. "Some come to me, some I go to meet." Ruby stepped back from the cloth, swallowing. The lamps flickered slightly, as if in response. Ruby flashed a smile. "What exactly are you collecting, mister?" "I collect stories. Each object comes complete with a dark history. The Grey House collects tales. Please feel free to look around, and perhaps you'll allow me to share a tale or two." The Grey House creaked with memory. Every corridor was lined with art, portraits, landscapes, doodles, a child's drawing like you might find on a fridge door. The entry room they passed through housed tables and bureaus, and shelves stacked with all manner of shiny trinkets and dusty boxes. The ceiling lights that ranged from chandeliers to bare bulbs remained dim, but the many lit lamps cast shadows that seemed to tilt slightly the wrong way. It was teetering on a tightrope between creepy and eccentric. Vinny picked up just one of many books from a hallway table and flicked through it. Each page was a picture showing black and white photos of a staircase with a woman tumbling down it, like a flick book of an accident that looked fatal. "This stairwell's an exhibit," Mordecai said, nodding to the real one winding up beside them. 1897. The wife found a letter. The husband introduced her to gravity. Vinny scoffed. "You charge admission for this morbid museum?" Gray gave a polite chuckle. "No charge. It's been some time since I've had guests." They weren't listening. Their eyes had been scanning desk drawers, mantel clocks, shelves with neglected silver. Maybe this night wasn't a failure after all. But outside, the storm deepened, and somewhere upstairs a phonograph began to play, soft, scratchy, and there was something odd about it. The percussion of every third beat was off. To Vinny, it sounded like the time he caved in little Donnie's head with a wrench. Gray stepped toward the cabinet beside the mantel. Behind glass, nestled in a velvet fold, sat a single silk glove. He tapped the glass gently with one finger, the motion almost reverent. "Let me tell you about Mrs. Finch's missing glove," he said, voice softer now, as if the tale needed quiet to be heard. Tales from the Grey House, Episode 2, The Gloved Reminder. "Go on then, buddy, knock yourself out," Vinny said, waving a hand at the cabinet. "Tell us about this Finch dame and her fancy glove." Mordecai Grey gestured toward a long glass case beside a warped mirror. Inside lay a single silk glove, grey, monogrammed with a faint, elegant F. "Ah," he murmured, with the cadence of a curtain drawing closed. "A tale of mystery, and perhaps murder." Vinny snorted. "What is it with you and these artifacts?" "They remember," Grey replied, "even when people forget." Ruby's eyes narrowed slightly on Grey, as if weighing the truth in his voice. The storm clawed at the windows, thunder rolling over the hills like loose barrels. Somewhere outside, a tree surrendered with a crack that echoed through the walls. Inside, the grey house was dry but not warm. Ruby rubbed her hands, still unsettled by the damp cloth she touched earlier and by what Grey had implied about it. Vinny drifted along the shelves, trailing his fingers over book spines with titles half faded or written in alphabets he didn't recognise. One wasn't a language at all, just shapes that made his eyes ache. Stranger objects crowded the room. A broken camera resting on sepia photographs. A snow globe showing a mermaid dragging a sailor under. A cupboard drawer that rattled softly, though no one had touched it. They hadn't meant to hide out in a haunted museum, but after a robbery gone wrong and a car riddled with holes, this was shelter, maybe even opportunity. Grey cleared his throat. His gloved fingertip traced the edge of the glass, as if waking the story inside. "She was the one with the money," he began. "Old estate, older pride. Her husband Paul was young, handsome, fluent in flattery, but silent in sincerity. One afternoon she left the house to visit a friend and discuss E.F. Benson's new book. Half an hour later she returned, having remembered she'd left her glove on the bureau. A small thing, but that day it became everything. Paul was not alone. The maid, Evelyn, younger still, was tangled with him as though secrets had no weight. Mrs. Finch, Anna, demanded explanation, screamed, sobbed, clutched at her chest. Her voice weakened. "My medicine, Paul, quickly, it's on the mantel." He didn't move. Evelyn didn't either. She died in the hallway, just steps from the glove she'd come back for. They buried her in silk, both gloves, this one and its mate. Somewhere deep in the house, a floorboard sighed, long, low, almost sympathetic. Grey tapped the glass gently. "Now, here is what the papers missed. The morning after Paul and Evelyn's wedding night, they were found cold in their bed. No struggle, no poison, no intruder. This glove," he paused. When next he spoke, his voice was thinner, "was discovered between them. The stitching worn, dirt on the silk that was not present when it was buried." Ruby swallowed. "So you're saying the glove did it?" Grey smiled, polite, unreadable. "I offer no conclusions, only remnants. You may believe what you wish." Vinny rolled his eyes. "Sounds like a lover's quarrel and a ghost story had a baby." Grey's smile deepened by a fraction. "That baby," Grey said softly, "was born wearing gloves." Ruby felt a cold prickle up her spine. The rain swelled. Upstairs, the phonograph coughed into life again, a slow, mournful piece, one piano key repeating like a question someone was afraid to finish. "Would you care to see another piece?" Grey asked. Ruby hesitated, her fingers brushing the cloth-wrapped corner of a shelf. "Sure," she said quietly. "What else does the Grey House remember?" Grey paused, a tiny wry smile touching one corner of his mouth. "It remembers what was taken, what was broken, what still waits, and sometimes—" Grey's gaze drifted toward the darkened corridor as though listening for something. "What never was, and never will be, nor should be." A lamp flickered, briefly bending its shadow the wrong way. Tales from the Grey House, Episode 3, The Diary That Wouldn't End. Gray opened a drawer with a kind of slow reverence reserved for coffins or communion wafers. Inside, nestled in velvet gone brittle with age, sat 3 objects. A brass key with no teeth, darkened by heat and time. A shattered locket holding half a photograph, just a child's hand waving. A pocket diary bound in something tougher than leather, its clasp held shut by a rusted pin that looked reluctant to let go. The velvet seemed to breathe in the lamplight as they looked at the drawer contents. "I offer you 3 recollections," Gray said quietly. "Each came from a hand that trembled. You may choose one." Vinny's jaw tightened. For a moment, sharp, hot, he felt the old instinct to lash out, to silence the man and his stories. Gray was creepy, cracked, maybe dangerous, but something in the way he spoke, it pulled. It reminded Vinny of Halloween nights when his mother's old beau, reeking of whiskey and rage, would tell ghost stories by jack-o'-lantern light, back before his belt had left marks on everything but the walls. Vinny exhaled. "All right, let's hear one." He didn't know why. Maybe he missed the part of himself that used to believe. He pointed to the diary. Gray smiled, not triumphant, merely expectant, and rested his hand on the diary. The rusted pin trembled as he unfastened it. "Isadora Naismith arrived as governess after the first Mrs. Hartley ran away with her lover. That was the husband's story. The children never believed it." He opened the diary. The pages seemed to breathe. "At first, Isadora wrote of lessons, chores, the children's moods. Then their dreams began." Ruby leaned in. "Arthur woke crying that someone was tapping on the windows from under the lake. Bryony whispered that Mama is cold and asked Isadora to brush the weeds from her hair. The children spoke of their mother as though she was still in the house, dripping, patient, watching." Gray turned a page. The ink shimmered like water. "Then the diary changed. Isadora would wake to find new entries written in her hand, describing the wife's last night. The argument, the shove, the splash, the hands holding her under, the silence." Vinny's jaw tightened. "The husband insisted his wife had run away, but the diary disagreed, and the children's dreams agreed with the diary." Gray's voice thinned. "One night, Isadora followed wet footprints down the stairs. They led to the lake." Ruby swallowed. "The husband was waiting for her. He dragged her into the water, the same place he'd drowned his wife. He meant to finish her story the same way. But the lake stirred. A hand rose from the weeds, pale, swollen, unmistakably hers. His dead wife pulled him under." Isadora crawled back to shore. Vinny exhaled. Ruby's voice was barely above a whisper. "And the diary?" Gray tapped the cover with one gloved finger. It wrote one last page, a single line. "I did not run," signed in the dead wife's hand. Vinny frowned. "So what? Ghost diary?" Gray shook his head. "Not a ghost, a truth spoken at last." He closed the diary gently, as though afraid it might wake. "But once one voice found its way onto the page, others noticed." Ruby blinked. "Others?" Gray's smile was thin, almost apologetic. "The dead talk to each other, Miss Ruby. They share ideas, and this one was popular." He slid the diary back into the drawer. New hands began to write. Old grievances, lost names, secrets that never reached the living. The lantern flickered. Upstairs the storm wind rattled a window. Gray lowered his voice. "The wife only wanted the truth. The others want to be heard." Gray's words were nonsense, but woven so neatly they almost sounded like truth. Vinny had known a con man like that once, a slick bastard who could sell tin as gold just by smiling at it. Same cadence, same confidence, same danger humming under the surface. Outside, the storm eased into a slow, steady rhythm. Upstairs, the rattling window fell silent. In its place, something began to hum, soft, off-key, like someone soothing a child who wasn't there. Tales from the Grey House, Episode 4, Artifacts That Ruin. Vinny shook himself. I'm done with the fairy tales. You've got weird junk, sure, but some of it has to be worth something. Let's get practical. What's your most valuable piece? Gray turned toward a cabinet sealed with brass locks shaped like bird skulls. I offer artifacts of questionable worth, he said. To thieves, they may promise riches. To listeners, caution. He opened the case. 3 objects lay on velvet. A deep blue stone that shimmered like a drowned star. A tarnished pin with an iridescent stain that refused to fade. A garnet so hollow light it seemed to hum against the air. Choose one, Gray said. I'll tell you its tale, or you may take it. I won't stop you. I wouldn't recommend it. Vinny eyed them. What's the least cursed one? Gray smiled. His hand hovered over the blue stone. He lifted it. It shimmered like a star seen through water. The lapis of Vereniel, he said. Taken from a drowned man's pocket. Ruby frowned. Drowned? Where? Gray's eyes softened. In the middle of the desert. A travelling merchant. He bought the stolen gem from pirates. Slept in a canvas tent, miles from water. They found him with lungs full to bursting, sand dry as bone. Vinny blinked. In the desert? Gray nodded. The pirates stole it from its original owner, threw him overboard. As he sank, he cursed the gem, swore anyone who kept it would share his fate. Lamplight rippled across the stone surface. It was hurled into the sea. 3 days later, it washed up on my doorstep. Vinny scowled. So why ain't you drowned? Gray's smile was matter of fact. The lapis belongs to the house, not to me. You can't drown a house. The stone pulsed faintly. Gray moved to the next. He lifted the tarnished pin. The iridescent stain shimmered like a trapped breath. This is the Rothrold pin, falls as a talisman, a charm to grant each owner a single wish. Ruby leaned in. Did it work? Oh, it worked, Gray said. But the metal was flawed. The wish always came true, just never the way it was meant to. He turned the pin. The stain shifted, remembering. A conductor found it in a pawn shop. He liked the way it caught the light. It picked up his wish to compose a symphony so magnificent it would be remembered forever. Vinny snorted. And? He got his wish. The performance was flawless, transcendent. People wept. They applauded long after the music had ended. Gray paused. And then, one by one, they stopped applauding. They couldn't recall a single note. Not the melody, not the rhythm, not even the silence between movements. Ruby shivered. How can you forget something that moved you? Because the pin granted magnificence, Gray said, tapping the stain. But the flaw twisted the rest. The symphony was unforgettable, so it erased itself, even from the paper it was written on. Vinny swallowed. And the conductor? Gray set the pin down gently. He's still conducting, in his mind, over and over, trying to remember the masterpiece he created, and can't. He touched the third stone. Lastly, the hollow garnet, light for its kind, said to hum against the skin. It belonged to a fortune teller who gave readings in languages no one knew. Vinny sneered, eyes darted from jewel to jewel. Gray folded his hands. She called herself Madame Petronelle. Not her real name, that was a secret she kept to herself. He lifted the garnet. It hummed faintly. This stone once held a soul, not a ghost, not a memory, a person who refused to pass on. At first, it gave her insight, clarity, a voice not entirely her own. Her readings were perfect, too perfect. Ruby frowned. So it helped her? He turned the gem. Light passed through it like breath. But the soul inside was hungry. It wanted more than to whisper. It wanted a body again. Vinny shifted. She began speaking in languages no one knew. Not prophecy, possession. The soul was trying her voice on for size. Ruby swallowed. What happened to her? The exchange continued, mind for mind, soul for soul, until one morning she simply wasn't there. No farewell. her tea still hot, her chair still creaking. He set the garnet down. Only the stone remained, heavier than before, as though it had gained something. The gem pulsed. Every so often it glows when you say her name, not because she hears you, because the soul inside is checking whether you might fit. Vinny leaned closer. Petronelle? The stone flickered. Gray smiled faintly. See? Vinny didn't believe in ghosts or prophecies, but Gray's voice had that undercurrent that made even nonsense sound undeniable, like he wasn't trying to convince anyone, just stating what was. It was the way his eyes didn't ask to be trusted, they simply were. Vinny reached toward the garnet, hand trembling, then stopped. He looked up at Gray. If you're lying, you've got the devil's slickness about you. Gray bowed his head. And if I'm not? Vinny said nothing. Tales from the Grey House, Episode 5, Rooms That Do Not Settle. The house groaned gently as Vinny drummed his fingers against the window. Rain fell in sheets, no harder, no softer, just endless. I dunno, he muttered, shifting uncomfortably. Maybe we could eat something. Gray paused mid-step, head tilted like he'd caught a curious note in the silence. Something warm? Vinny waved vaguely. Doesn't have to be gourmet, just enough to distract us. Gray's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course, I'm not much of an eater myself, but I do keep supplies for guests. He vanished down a hallway they hadn't noticed a moment ago. Alone at last, Ruby and Vinny wandered deeper into Gray's strange menagerie. Cabinets crept across the walls like moss, lined with relics that looked donated by unease itself. A pair of child-sized gloves, sealed in glass, labelled simply, "They never wrinkle." A photograph of a man whose face Ruby felt unsettlingly sure changed slightly every few minutes. A locket shaped like a moth's wing, pulsing with a faint heartbeat, surely a trick of the light. 12 wooden teaspoons, each labelled with a specific emotion. A ledger titled "Names Not to be Named Twice," filled with illegible entries. Velvet-lined drawers held riddles no one had written down. One contained a dress folded from newspaper, every headline recounting a different disaster. Floods, fires, missing children, wars that never reached this country. The ink had bled in places, as though the stories had tried to escape. Another drawer held a jar that looked like it had captured a storm. Sound whirled within. Ruby paused beneath a painting where the brushstrokes resembled scratches. You think he's hypnotising us? Vinny scoffed, but softer than usual. I don't know. He's got that voice, like a priest who's heard something in a confessional he wasn't supposed to. He doesn't blink enough, she said. The guy's either cracked or... What? Ruby glanced over her shoulder, not quite ready to say. They stopped beneath a shelf of carved hands labelled "Borrowed Gestures." Vinny leaned in. So, we wait out the night, find something worth stealing, kill the guy. Ruby raised an eyebrow. And then what? Loot a cursed garnet and spend the rest of our lives being haunted by Madame Petronelle's hot tea? Vinny stared at her. You're colder than me. She shrugged. I listen better. They walked on, slower now. Ruby hesitated beside a closed door. I want more stories, she said. I don't want more stories. Vinny nodded, almost to himself. That might be the most honest thing anyone said in this house. He poked idly at a taxidermied bat with spectacles glued to its snout. Does this guy collect weirdness or breed it? Ruby didn't answer. She'd slipped into a narrower hall, the wallpaper printed with muted floral swirls, dreamlike, almost symbolic. There, on an oxidized tray beneath a dollhouse-sized coffin, lay something that made her stop. A funeral card, elegant, frayed at the edges. The ink faded like it had wept itself dry. Beside it, an old photograph, Elspeth in profile, veil lifted just enough to glimpse a nose strikingly like Ruby's own. Then came a musical chime, not from the phonograph, but the ceiling, something shifting overhead. She turned to call for Vinny, but the corridor behind her was not where she remembered it, replaced by a wall covered in hand-drawn maps of rooms that didn't exist. When Gray reappeared, he held a plate of sandwiches, irregularly triangular. The bread was white as marble, the jam rich and red, almost vivid enough to bleed. Sister Mary used to cut them like this, Ruby thought, carving each triangle out of the square one by one, so no two pieces were ever the same size. The jam tasted like her old recipe too, cinnamon folded through strawberry. Gray watched her with a whimsical tilt of the head. Ruby felt sure he somehow knew. "Eat up," he said, "so you'll grow up big and strong," echoing the nun's words 2 decades gone. "Funny," Gray added gently, "how flavour carries memory. Be careful not to wander too far. Some rooms in the house aren't settled yet. They might mistake you for part of the decor." Vinny popped one triangle into his mouth, then frowned mid-chew. "Tastes like childhood," he said, "but not mine." Tales from the Grey House, Episode 6, The Note That Broke the World. The humming began again upstairs, faint, like someone pressing their lips to memory, trying to sing it back into place. It threaded between the storm creaks and the shallow wheeze of the phonograph. A tune no one knew, yet something about it made Vinny frown, as though he'd heard it once, maybe in a dream, or in a hospital hallway at night. "Who's up there?" he barked. Mordecai Gray looked toward the ceiling. "I live alone." "So who's humming?" "The phonograph plays what it wants," Gray replied. "Songs that never made it into the grooves. That melody belonged to a mother who hummed her child to sleep, a troubled child." "You're telling me a dead machine plays unwritten music?" Vinny snapped. "Forget it. Ghosts, murders, I can stretch to that. I've seen things. But haunted humming? You're losing me, old man." Gray studied him quietly. "There is no living soul here other than myself." Upstairs the humming stopped, but the phonograph played on. It was a tune Ruby had sung back in convent school, the sound of children, distant, like a memory she'd forgotten was hers. She shut it off, scolding herself for being ridiculous. Ruby shivered beside a cabinet lined with crumbling sheet music. One title caught her eye, Holt's Unstarted Symphony. Ruby leaned close to the tray. "These sandwiches, they taste like Sister Mary's recipe." Vinny raised an eyebrow. "That's oddly specific." "It's the cinnamon. She added cinnamon to the jam. It's not common." Ruby stared at Gray, who now seemed to be counting spoon reflections in a nearby cabinet. "He's playing tricks on our memories." Vinny shook his head. "Or maybe he's reminding us of something we shouldn't have forgotten." Gray spoke without turning. "Memories are like gravity in this house. They have mass. They pull." A faint humming drifted from somewhere deeper in the house, a working man's hum, the kind made without thinking. "This way," Gray said. "Some sorrows are quieter than others." He led them into a narrow wing where the air felt still, reverent. No flickering lights, no shifting walls, just dust, velvet, and the weight of things left unsaid. "These," Gray murmured, "are the quieter tragedies. Not cursed, not haunted, just heavy." A pair of spectacles with one cracked lens. Tag, he saw her kiss someone else. A child's drawing of a house with no doors, drawn the day she stopped speaking. A jar, sealed tight, humming faintly. A small oval mirror, its frame tarnished, its tag red, it speaks too plainly. Ruby lingered at a small envelope sealed in glass, yellowed, folded once. The ink on the front had faded, perhaps by sunlight or from repeated reading. "What's this one?" she asked. Gray folded his hands. "This is the note that broke a man's heart, and then broke a town." "His name was John Rook," Gray began. "Postmaster, switchboard operator, telegram clerk. A man who handled every message that passed through his town. One winter, he bought a second-hand coat. Found the note in the pocket." Gray recited it softly. "I never loved you. I only stayed because I was afraid of being alone." John didn't know who wrote it, but he knew who had worn that coat before him, a quiet man who drowned himself in the quarry the month before. And John realised, in that moment, what a sentence like that could do to a person. Vinny shifted uneasily. Gray continued. He started small, a misdelivered letter, a telegram delayed, a traced signature. Then he escalated. He steamed open envelopes, read confessions, copied handwriting, inserted lies, removed truths, sent anonymous notes to neighbours, friends, children. Ruby swallowed. What did they say? Gray's voice thinned. Each one different, but often ending the same. You are not loved. And the town responded. A marriage collapsed after a forged letter revealed an affair. 2 brothers stopped speaking over a telegram John rewrote. A shopkeeper was ostracised after John sent notes implying a shameful act he hadn't committed. Feuds turned violent. A man was killed, all because of a rumour John had invented. Vinny stared at the envelope behind the glass. And nobody suspected him? Gray smiled sadly. John was helpful, polite, always in church, always delivering bad news with a sympathetic frown. He was the heart of the town, the one man everyone trusted. Ruby whispered. So what happened? Gray sighed. They began to piece it together, slowly, too slowly. By the time they'd realised every lie had passed through John's hands, he was gone. Walked out one morning, no forwarding address, no note. He tapped the glass. But this remained, the first cruelty he ever witnessed, and the first cruelty he ever learned to imitate. Ruby's voice was barely a breath. Did he write it himself? Gray smiled faintly. Does it matter? The humming in the corridor stopped. Somewhere in the house, a door clicked shut, softly, like punctuation. Tales from the Grey House, Episode 7, The Echoes We Keep. The house had settled. No creaks, no flickers, just the soft hush of velvet and dust. Ruby wandered ahead, drawn to a cabinet of silverware. She picked up a spoon, plain, slightly tarnished, the kind you find in a church kitchen. She tilted it toward her face. The reflection didn't match. It showed her as a girl, maybe 10, hair tied back with a fraying ribbon. She was pulling a ridiculous face, tongue out, eyes crossed, cheeks puffed. She remembered it instantly. The lunchroom, her classmates laughing, Sister Mary scowling from the doorway. Ruby smiled. I haven't thought about that in years. She passed the spoon to Vinny. He looked. His reflection was younger, maybe 7, sitting at a table, staring at a plate of cold stew. Then a hand entered the reflection, rough, impatient. A man's voice echoed faintly, as if from the spoon itself. Eat up! I work hard to earn money for your food. Don't waste it! Vinny flinched. That's Mum's boyfriend. I forgot his voice. Gray appeared beside them, silent as ever. These spoons were used in the orphanage. They remember the mouths they fed. Ruby whispered. Why show us this? Gray shrugged. Some artifacts don't want to be forgotten. They moved on to a narrow display shelf. Among the small, sorrow-soaked relics lay a single ticket stub, faded, torn at the corner, stamped with a place name Ruby didn't recognise. Nid Hollow, Admit 1. The ink had bled into the paper like it had been rained on long before it ever reached this house. Vinny frowned. Where the hell is Nid Hollow? Gray didn't look at the ticket. Some places are better left unvisited. Ruby felt a chill she couldn't explain. In the next room, a single artifact sat on a pedestal, a small wooden music box, carved with stars and moons. No key, no hinge, just a touch-sensitive lid. Ruby reached out. It opened with a soft click. Music spilled out, delicate, slow, almost broken. A lullaby, but not one she knew. Still, her eyes welled up. Vinny sat down, suddenly exhausted. I feel like I've heard this before, but not in this life. Gray nodded. It's called The Sleep of the Forgotten. It was composed by a woman who lost her child in a fire. She wrote it for the child's dreams, not her own. Ruby closed the box. The silence that followed was heavier than the music. Vinny looked at Gray. Why do you keep these things? Gray didn't answer. Instead, he placed the spoon and the music box side by side. They're not dangerous, Ruby said. "No," Gray replied, "but they're true." Ruby lingered by the pedestal long after the lullaby faded. The silence pressed in, thick as velvet. It wasn't oppressive, just expectant, like the house was waiting for someone to speak first. Vinny rubbed his face. "Feels like this place keeps picking at things, stuff I didn't even know was still in me." Gray didn't look at him. "The house doesn't pick, it listens, and sometimes listening is enough." Ruby stepped away from the music box, her fingers trembling. "It's not just memories, is it? These things, they're echoes." Gray nodded once. "Echoes we keep, echoes we inherit, echoes we pretend aren't ours." They moved deeper into the room. The air cooled, the lights dimmed, not by flicker, but by intention, as though the house wanted their attention narrowed to a single object on the far wall. A frame hung there, empty. No glass, no backing, just a wooden frame, suspended by a nail that looked older than the plaster around it. Ruby frowned. "What's supposed to be in it?" Gray's voice softened. "Whatever you refuse to look at." Vinny snorted. "Great! A frame that shows nothing! Very helpful!" But Ruby stepped closer, and the frame filled. Not with an image, with movement. A hallway, a door, a girl standing in the doorway, her hands clenched at her sides. Ruby's breath caught. She knew that hallway. She knew that girl. She knew exactly what she'd been about to say, and exactly why she never said it. Vinny grabbed her arm. "Ruby, don't!" She blinked, and the frame emptied again. Gray exhaled slowly. "Some echoes don't want to be remembered. Others don't want to be forgotten. The frame doesn't choose. It only reveals what you've left unfinished." Ruby stepped back, shaken. Vinny swallowed hard. "So what does it want from us?" Gray finally looked at them, really looked at them. "It wants nothing. The house is not hungry. It is not cruel. It simply holds what people leave behind. And most people leave behind more than they realise." He stood silent for a moment. The air was still. Ruby whispered, "Are we supposed to do something with them?" Gray shook his head. "No, you're supposed to understand them." The house settled again. Not a creak, not a sigh, just a quiet, resonant stillness, like a breath held between heartbeats. Tales from the Grey House, Episode 8, The Cabinet of Ghosts. They sat in the velvet lounge, the music box closed but still echoing in their minds. The silence was thick, like syrup. Ruby leaned close to Vinny. "Did he drug the sandwiches?" Vinny blinked. "What?" "I'm serious. The cinnamon, the memories, the spoon. What if it's all a trick?" Vinny looked around. "Feels real." Ruby whispered, "I don't want it to be." They whispered more often now, watching Gray from corners. He moved too quietly. Floorboards creaked under them, but not under him. He drifted from room to room, like someone who weighed less than his own shadow. Vinny muttered, "Are we dreaming?" Ruby replied, "If we are, it's the kind that remembers you when you wake." They tested themselves, pinched arms, counted fingers, tried to recall the journey here. None of it helped. Gray led them to a new room. It was colder. The walls were lined with glass cabinets, each filled with small jars. Some glowed faintly, others pulsed like hearts. "These," Gray said, "are ghost bottles." Ruby frowned. "Ghosts?" "Not spirits, not hauntings, just echoes. Memories too strong to die. People bottle them. Some do it willingly, others don't know they've done it." Vinny stepped closer. One jar had a label, "The moment I knew I'd never be loved." Another, the sound of her laughter before the accident. Ruby touched one. It was warm. Gray turned to them. "You can take one, or share one, or leave them all." Vinny asked, "What happens if we take one?" Gray smiled. "You carry it. It carries you." Ruby looked at Vinny. "Do we share a jar?" Vinny hesitated. "Depends what's inside." Gray held out 2 empty bottles. "Or you can fill your own." They walked deeper into the room, past rows of jars in every shape and age. Some were thin Victorian glass, bubbled and imperfect. Others were squat earthenware pots sealed with wax. A few were modern, jam jars, pill bottles, even a baby food jar with a rusted lid. Every one had a label. Ruby read them in passing. The scream no one believed, the last breath before the morphine, the sighs of the abandoned, the only time Andrew Sinclair cried, the knock on the door where the householder was already dead inside, the day I found my first pet stiff in the garden, the moment I realised he wasn't coming back, the apology I never said out loud. Some jars rattled faintly, as if remembering. Others were utterly still, holding their silence like a grudge. Vinny paused at a tall, cloudy bottle with a cracked cork. Its label was written in a shaking hand. I heard him calling. I didn't go. Ruby shivered. Why keep these? Gray answered without turning. Because forgetting doesn't bury anything. It just teaches it to wait. Ruby hesitated, then chose one at random. A small jar of a cloudy label. The ink had almost vanished, but she could still make out a few words. The night I stopped knocking. She held it up to the light. Inside something moved. Not smoke, not liquid, but a faint shimmer, like breath caught in glass. Gray said nothing. She uncorked it. The air changed. A sound leaked out, soft at first, then clearer. A rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on wood. Then a voice, muffled and desperate. Let me in! Vinny froze. Is that? The tapping grew louder, faster, until it sounded like someone hammering on the door just behind them. Thunder rolled somewhere distant. Rain pattered, not in the room, but inside the jar. The voice rose, cracking with cold. Mum! Mum, please! Ruby's breath hitched. The bottle vibrated in her hand, replaying the storm, the fear, the child's fists bruising against the wood. Gray spoke quietly. That one belonged to a woman who locked her son outside during a storm. She told herself she'd only meant to scare him. The knocking turned frantic. The child sobbed. Mum, I'm sorry, let me in! Ruby tried to close the jar, but the lid wouldn't fit. The storm inside grew louder, wind, rain, the child's voice breaking. Then the sound shifted, the knocking stopped. A silence so sudden, it felt like a held breath. Then the mother's voice, older, shaking, calling through the door. Sweetheart, you can come in now. I'm not angry. Please come in. Her voice rose, panicked. Open the door! Open the door! Open the... A final crack of thunder. The jar went still. Gray gently took it from Ruby's hands. When she opened the door, he said, he was gone. Ruby whispered, Gone where? Gray placed the jar back on the shelf. Echoes don't answer questions, they only repeat what hurt them. The music box began to play again, faint, uncertain, as if testing the air for ghosts. And somewhere, deep in the house, a single knock answered. Tales from the Grey House, Episode 9, The Lantern That Burned Without Flame. The house felt heavier now, not darker, just weighted, like a room where someone had been crying moments before you entered. Ruby and Vinny followed Gray into a narrow gallery, lined with lanterns of every shape and age. Some were brass, some were tin. One was carved from a single piece of bone. None of them were lit. Gray paused before a lantern made of blackened iron. Its glass warped as though it had melted and reformed. This, he said, is the lantern of Lenny Calder, a man who feared the dark so deeply he tried to burn it away. Ruby folded her arms. Another ghost story? Gray smiled faintly. A memory, nothing more. Calder was a night watchman, Gray began. A quiet man, dutiful, but he had one flaw. He believed the dark was watching him back. Vinny snorted. Sounds like a nutcase. Perhaps, Gray said, but fear is a powerful sculptor. He lifted the lantern gently. One night, Calder found the lantern in the lost and found. No wick, no oil, no mechanism at all, just an empty shell. But when he held it, it glowed. Ruby frowned. How? Gray shrugged. Some objects burn with memory instead of fire, he continued. Calder carried the lantern everywhere. It lit his path, it warmed his hands, it whispered to him soft, reassuring things. He felt safe for the first time in years. Vinny leaned in despite himself. But the lantern grew brighter and brighter and brighter still, until Calder could no longer see the world around him, only the light. He walked straight into the river, convinced he was stepping onto a sunlit road. Ruby whispered, "Did he drown?" Gray nodded. They found him clutching the lantern, still glowing, still warm, still whispering. He set the lantern back on its shelf. Some fears, he said softly, don't want to be cured, they want to be fed. Ruby's eyes drifted to the other lanterns lining the walls, dented, pristine, cracked, warped, each one holding its own quiet menace. What about the others? She asked. What do they do? Gray turned to her with a look that was almost fond. They illuminate, he said. Ruby frowned. Illuminate what? Gray stepped between the row of lanterns, fingertips brushing the handles as though greeting old friends. If you light them, he said, you see what they illuminated for their last holder. Vinny snorted. Like memories? Gray shook his head. Not memories, moments. The last thing they ever saw clearly. Ruby swallowed. And if someone lights one now? Gray paused beside the lantern shaped like a teardrop. Then, he said softly, you see what they saw, whether you wish to or not. A low hum rolled through the gallery, not from the lanterns, but from the walls themselves, the house shifting its weight, listening. Ruby stepped back. Vinny muttered, Yeah, let's not light anything. Gray smiled faintly. A wise choice. Some lights shine on things better left in shadow. Ruby drifted toward a low cabinet in the back of the gallery. Something inside glinted. Gray, she called softly, what's this? Gray didn't answer. Vinny joined her and froze. Inside the cabinet sat a canvas bag, stained, frayed, stamped with a faded crest. Blackfriars Jewellers, London. The drawstring was torn. A spill of cut gemstones glittered like frozen lightning. Vinny's breath hitched. No way! No bloody way! Ruby frowned. What is it? Vinny swallowed hard. The Blackfriars job, London, 1922. Biggest jewel heist of its time. Crew turned on each other, shot each other dead. The gems were never found. He pressed a hand to the glass. Every thief knows this story. Ruby whispered. Is it cursed too? Gray shook his head gently. No, not cursed. Not unless greed prompts betrayal in either of your hearts. Vinny's jaw tightened. Just a flicker, but enough. Ruby stepped back. Vinny, don't. Gray's voice was soft. You may take it if you wish. Vinny stared at him, and for the first time believed the house was offering him a gift. A way out, a fortune, a future. Then a thought hit him sideways. How the hell did this get to America? Ruby blinked. What? Vinny shook his head unsettled. We're in the States. How are London jewels? He didn't finish. A sudden silence fell. The storm, the endless pounding storm that had followed them since the heist, stopped. Not faded, not softened, stopped. Like someone had closed a door on the sky. Vinny froze. Ruby whispered, That's not right. Gray folded his arms behind his back. Storms end, he said. Even the ones we carry. Vinny's jaw tightened. His thoughts sharpened to a single cold line. The rain's done. Time to finish this. Shoot the old man. Grab the valuables. Get out. He slid a hand toward his coat. Gray watched him, not alarmed, not surprised, just waiting. The lanterns flickered. The house held its breath. Tales from the Grey House, Episode 10. Every story finds its shelf. The lanterns flickered as Vinny drew the gun. Ruby drew her own weapon, jaw tight. Gray didn't flinch. Vinny's voice was low, shaken with adrenaline and something darker. "All right, old man. Storm's done. We're done. We'll take the jewels and be on our way." Ruby's eyes drifted to the window. She froze. "Vinny, the car." "What about it?" "It's gone." He looked and his breath hitched. The Model T was no longer outside, just emptiness where they'd left it. Vinny snapped toward Gray. "Where is it?" Gray raised one gloved hand, calm as a priest. "In the garage," he said gently, "where it belongs." "We didn't put it there," Ruby whispered. "No," Gray agreed. "You didn't." "Show us." Gray inclined his head. "Of course." He led them down the narrow corridor, lanterns guttering as they passed. The house seemed to lean in, listening. The garage door loomed ahead, iron-bound, heavy. Gray pushed it open with one hand. The garage stretched into darkness, rows of vehicles waiting like sleepers. Just inside the threshold sat the Model T, hunched under a single bulb. Bullet holes punched through the doors, glass spiderwebbed, rainwater dripping from the fenders. The windows were fogged, opaque with condensation. Ruby stepped forward, but Gray raised a hand. "Before you go," he murmured, "one more thing." Vinny lifted the gun. "Don't move." Gray didn't. Vinny fired. The gunshot cracked through the garage, but the house swallowed the sound like a stone dropped into deep water. Gray didn't fall, didn't bleed, didn't flinch. He simply straightened his lapel. Vinny stared. What? What are you?" Gray's expression softened into something between pity and amusement. "When I said there was no living soul here but myself," a quiet sigh, "I was lying." He stepped closer, voice smooth and unhurried. "You see, Vincent, I'm not alive." Vinny shook his head violently. "You're lying!" Gray tilted his head. "And neither are you." Ruby made a small involuntary sound, a yelp, sharp and wounded. She was staring at the Model T. The fogged windows were clearing, slowly, relentlessly, like breath fading from a mirror. Inside, two bodies slumped in the seats, bullet-riddled, rain-soaked, still. Vinny refused to look. Gray's voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Look at all the bullet holes. It would take a miracle to survive that." He let the line hang. Not cruel, not mocking, just true. Ruby trembled. That can't be us. We got away." "Did you?" She looked down. Her blouse was torn, a small perfect hole. Then another, then another. Dark stains bloomed like returning memories. She touched one. Her fingers turned red. Her voice broke. "Vinny, we were shot." Gray bowed his head. "Yes, my dear." Vinny looked down at himself. His shirt was riddled with holes, dark stains spreading, one over the heart, one in the stomach, one in the shoulder. He touched them, then looked at his stained hands. "No! I'd feel it! I'd feel it!" Gray's voice was soft. "You felt it once. You do not feel it now." Ruby didn't scream, didn't fight. She simply understood. A tear slipped free. "We didn't make it out." Gray nodded. "When the rain turned heavy with lead," Gray said, "your life slipped away." Vinny fired again. Click, click, click. He tried to bargain. "Let us go! We won't take anything! Just let us go!" Gray stepped closer, pity in his eyes. "Vincent, you can't leave where you belong." Vinny raged, shaking, pleading, furious. Gray lifted two empty bottles. He held them like sacred instruments, the glass trembling faintly in his hands. The air thickened, lanterns dimmed. The first bottle filled with colour, a pale shimmer that pulsed like breath. The convent hallway, nuns' shoes clicking, Ruby as a girl flinching under the cane. The long corridor from the picture frame, the night she met Vinny, smoke and danger in the air. Each moment folded into the next, until the bottle glowed with a soft, sorrowful warmth. Ruby's tears caught the light, scattering it across her face. The second bottle resisted. It shook, as though the glass itself remembered violence. His mother's distant stare appeared first, then the boyfriend's belt, the cramped rooms of his childhood, petty crimes hardening into heavier ones. The night he met Ruby, the only bright thing in his whole existence. Then the gunshots and the reflection of his own body in the shattered window. Vinny tried to knock it away, but his hand passed through, the bottle filled anyway. Gray placed them side by side on a velvet shelf. The labels wrote themselves in curling script. Ruby Harrow, the moment she knew. Vincent Doyle, the fight against the truth. The cabinet closed with a sigh. The house exhaled. Gray turned, voice smooth as varnish. Every story finds its shelf. And somewhere, deep within the house, another bottle began to hum, waiting to be labelled.